Very
That's all I
nice.
got.
It was beautiful. That's kind of a cross between like George of the Jungle and Poinciana by Ahmad Jamal.
I was going for sing, sing, sing. I
Yeah.
just
Oh, and sing, sing, sing. Of course, of course.
fell
Yeah.
flat. No, I don't know what I was doing. Before we jumped on, I was like, "Oh, Rick's not here. I got to play." And I said, "I'm going to grab these mallets and let's see what
I love it.
happens."
I love it. I love it.
It was fun.
Man, I've had, just a side note before we even get started. Hey, Fred, what's up? I used to go to like the music store and like always be on the lookout for new implements, like some kind of new brush or stick or mallet that came out that I didn't have or wasn't hip to. And
Right.
whenever something new came out, I'd grab it off the shelf and give it a try. And, the good stuff ended up in my stick bag, and the bad stuff that I didn't like ended up in my teaching studio, and
Right,
I've got
right.
a whole giant stick bag there, kind of reject, toys and mallets and stuff that I show students and talk about making different sounds using different implements. Anyways, sorry.
No, that's cool. That's cool. I literally I looked down and I thought I've got 2 pairs of sticks, 3 brushes. I don't know why there's 3 in there. 2 hot rods and a pair of mallets.
One for your hair.
What? Well, that's why there's only 3, man. That's why there's only 3.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Drummers Education Connection. We're so happy to be here. Today it's just me and Bart, which is what, man, I'm actually looking forward to this because I don't think Bart and I have ever done just a show, the two of us.
We haven't. Chip and I have, and I know you and Rick have, but you and I've never just done a show.
Yeah. So this is going to be super fun. We're going to get to talk a lot and listen and learn. And we'd love to hear from you guys. And thanks for tuning in. That's it. Only 2 of us, no guests, but you guys are our guests. We're going to talk today. Our episode today is called Standing on the Shoulders of Giants. And this was Bart's idea. And I thought it was a brilliant idea because we all feel this way all the time, that we're only doing what we do and able to do what we do as educators, as performers, because of the people who came before us. And on some of those, that there's personal connections to people that really have influenced us. We'll talk about that. And then there's the people whom we didn't know personally, but had a big impact on us musically, right? Or maybe some other way, not just musically, spiritually, or, academically, or whatever. What's the name of Steve Smith? Oh, Standing on the Shoulders of Giants is Steve Smith's DVD. Oh, that's cool.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. I didn't know that either. What a great name. I mean, and talk about a giant, man. That dude's a monster.
He's kind of short, dude.
Well, that's why.
Steve, peace.
Well, that's why Steve had to stand on the shoulders of the giant, because he couldn't see otherwise, right?
He can play his ass off, though. He'll play that giant under the table any day.
Oh, are you kidding? He's like one of the best drummers ever in the history of drumming. I've seen him in clinics a couple of times and also live, and man, is he a student of the instrument in the deepest way.
Yeah, definitely.
So all props and mad respect for Steve Smith. Anyway, yeah. So good things. What's happening with you that's good, Bart?
A lot of great stuff is going on. I've got a lot of fantastic students right now. Roster's full. I'm very thankful for that. All of my students are really just playing so well, and I'm so proud of them all. I have, coming up on the end of the year, this is my favorite time of year. I don't want to say I go into coast mode. I never do that, but I'm kind of like chilling out. I'm looking forward to Halloween and taking some time off and all that sort of stuff. Going out to Vegas this weekend and then to Arizona the following weekend. And they're just one-nighters, so it's not a big long run. We're just zipping in and out of town, playing some shows, coming home. And I've got my new, just about done. I talked about it last week with my new samples. Bullseye One Shots is the name of the company. And cool. I decided to name it that last week, and all the recording is all the recording's done, and kind of wrapping up the final little thing. So I'm going to launch my sample packages next week. Yeah, so those will be available on my website. So I'm excited about that. What about you, Jeremy? What's going on, bud?
Oh, as usual, a lot. Let's see. I had 2 recording sessions this past weekend. One was with this woman, Jean Feinberg, who's you met Jean at the gig. She's a sax player, and she played with some heavy people. She played on the song "We Are Family" by Sister Sledge, and she played with David.
Yeah. She told me that.
Some crazy stuff, some stories. She hung out with John Lennon and Paul McCartney, and she played it with David Bowie a little bit. Anyway, she's got a jazz octet here in the Bay Area. It's called Jazzphoria, and it's just eight. It's 8 people, but it's 7 women and me. So it's an all female group and the male drummer.
Cool. That's cool.
Yeah, it's a great band, really good players, and we had a recording session this weekend and went really well, and super psyched about that. I love recording, man. It's such a fun thing to do, to just like shut out the world and go in there and be super focused. And then the
What?
second day, I went to one of my friends who's also a sax player. His daughter is applying to college as a jazz vocalist. And so she had to do her audition videos. And so I went and played drums for her in this recording session with with a guitar and bass player friend. So we could help her with her college auditions, which was really, really fun. And they made dinner for us afterwards. So it was a really nice hang. And then Evan's doing great. We dropped him off in college 2 weeks ago, and he's loving it so far, and everything's great. We're all sad, of course, but we're excited. It was really weird dropping him off. It was like this crazy juxtaposition of intense excitement and joy and sadness all like right next to each other.
Yeah.
Of course, for him, we're all happy and everything, and then as soon as we dropped him off, we were, all the tears came, and we're so sad to see him go, but. It's great. It's great. Things are good.
I'm surprised you left. And did you leave claw marks on the side of the door? On the hallway? No, I don't want to leave.
Yeah. So that's my good stuff.
Cool.
All right. So we're going to talk about standing on the shoulders of giants. So what's the first thing that pops in your mind, Bart, when you hear that, or what comes up for you?
The first thing that pops in my head when it comes to that, honestly, is Dom Famularo. And that was the thing that kind of spawned the idea, as the people who are watching, and you and I know this, but we're now also a podcast on Spotify and on iHeartRadio and everywhere. And so I've been going through and making commercials for it and doing all this stuff to get it up and going. And I listened to the Dom interview that we did the other day, and it was such an awesome thing to have him on our show. And it was such an incredible honor to know the man and to study with him. And I think sometimes we talked about this before the show, Jeremy. It's really easy as a drummer, I think, to get lost within a band that you're playing with. And we were talking about maybe doing a whole show on that subject. But it's really easy to be like, yeah, I'm the drummer in the band. And Dom, to me, was this guy. He played dates and he played in bands and he worked as a working drummer, but he was so much more than that. Mm-hmm. And then I started thinking about the drummers who are educators. Okay, we just mentioned Steve Smith. We guys who've been on the show, guys like Joe Bergamini, Todd Zuckerman, Matt Starr, his name got brought up in our conversation. All of these people who are not just, I'm the guy in the band, and here's what you do if you're, the bass player is being a jerk or something. It's so much more than that. It's going out and playing the gig and dealing with the musicians in the band, but it's also talking to an 8-year-old about playing quarter notes and whole notes and half notes and explaining to them how rhythm works at the most elementary level, because you were that kid one day before. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You were that kid. And to me, I think that when I don't think there's a single person on the face of the earth that's picked up a pair of sticks and played in a band that wouldn't give their eye teeth to, sit behind Alex Van Halen's drum set in an arena and play with Van Halen. I know I would. It would be just what a dream come true to do that, right? Or to, put on the Catman makeup and crawl behind the drum set and play with Kiss. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that? Come on, we would all love that. But I think it's so much more than that, because you've got to find that spark within the kid for to help them be a drummer. And then also everybody that I've mentioned as well, have authored books, and they've just done so much for the drumming community. So to me, that's what standing on the shoulders of giants means. It's more than sitting behind the drum set and playing with the guys in the band. Although that be important, I love every second of that, but it's so much more than that to me. That's what it does. That's what it means to me. What about you?
Yeah, boy. I mean, you tapped right away into sort of the personal, more holistic aspect of, like, just being a human being, a happy, healthy, thriving, responsible, socially responsible human being. And there's so many influences that have come my way in that regard that have nothing to do with music even.
Yeah,
But
good point. Good point.
professors
Right.
I had in college and authors I read and stuff like that. But I want to start just musically. I mean, the first yeah, Dom, what an inspirational figure, and there's people like him that we've had on, like Zorro last week. I mean, he sort of
Oh yeah.
reminded me of Dom a little bit in his magnanimity and generosity and spirit. It's just so positive. Rick Stojak for one, but the first person that comes up for me was my most formative teacher. My drum teacher in high school, his name was Norman Grossman. He was a New York City session drummer, and I think I only studied with him for like 3 years, but boy, were those 3 years important for me and impactful. Um, and so much of who I am today as a drummer and how I play, I owe to him. Not just what he taught me in the lessons for those 3 years, but what he taught me to be able to teach myself moving forward beyond that.
Mhm.
Um, lessons that would resonate for a long time after the actual lesson stopped. Um,
I had a
and
teacher like that too. His name was Ted Fulte. I didn't mean to interrupt your thought, but I would be remiss and it would be insulting to him if I didn't say it. He was my eighth grade band director, seventh and eighth grade, no, eighth grade band director. And I saw him years later at a gig. He came out and saw me play, and I couldn't call him Ted. I called him Mr. Fulte. And he was such a great guy. And it was the same thing where he taught me a lot about being a drummer, and he taught me a lot about being a showman. He was the guy
Mhm.
that was like, be a ham, his big thing was, take your sticks and hold them up like this. He was that guy, but he played for Bob Hope,
Oh, wow.
and he played for Bob Hope when Bob Hope was Bob Hope,
Yeah.
and that was his thing. His big thing was, be more than that. You want to be the drummer and you want to be the guy in the band who, you want to do that, but there's so much more to it than that. It's He made me realize what it meant to, as simple as this sounds, he made me realize what it meant to, when you go out there on the road and you're playing with a band and you're in a new city or a new town or a new country, go eat the food,
Hmm.
enjoy it, find out if you hate it. Maybe you hate it, maybe you like it. Enjoy life, go see the sights, and I was like, I never thought of that. I was just,
Play drums.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, I learned. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your thought, but yeah, he did that for me.
Uh, yeah, I think about players, that had a big influence on me, and like I feel like I wouldn't be the player that I am had I not listened to certain drummers growing up or even later. Um, Elvin Jones had a really big impact on me. I saw him maybe 6 or 7 times and hung out with him a
Really?
little bit after a couple of his shows, and uh, yeah, that was a powerful experience to listen to him play and watch him play. And boy, I don't know. It's really important to remember. We've had so many amazing top of the world drummers on our show, guests. It's really easy to forget that everybody starts out as a beginner. You know,
Yeah.
we all are just regular old people born in whatever situation we're born in, and somehow we got sparked and excited about this instrument and picked it up, and then from there on we had people that influenced us. Like, you don't live in this world in a vacuum. You're not a musician or an artist or anything in a vacuum, and so you're influenced by so many people that came before you, right? And
Right.
every person, the important ones in the history of drumming, all the great names we could drop, they did something that was meaningful and pushed the instrument and the music forward to some next place, and
Right.
that influenced the next generation of drummers, and they're all their peers were influenced by them, and they in turn influenced the next people. And I think that's what Dom was about a lot. He talked a lot about that, and where he came from. He talked about Jim Chapin, being one of his mentors, um, and boy, did he, did Dom pay it forward in such a massive way, not just as an
Yeah.
instructor, but like globally, right? And with all the stuff he did to empower people playing drums and teaching drums, and so he was so supportive of everybody. So he's a sort of shining example of like, boy, a really important person that did a lot for drumming as a cultural thing in the world in the 20th century, or whatever.
Right.
Um, and we all do our part, but I think it's important to remember that nobody did this on their own.
Right.
You all had people that helped you along the way, and it's important to sort of pay it back and keep this gift that's making the world a better place in its own way, changing people's lives for the better, and offering people a path. I mean, talk about Zorro last week, where he was like, you know grew up, in the inner city, and like with a whole bunch of brothers and sisters, and didn't have a lot of money growing up, but then this thing was his path and his ticket, and now he's like as successful as anybody as a professional musician. So
I think that to recognize that spark that originally ignites something within us to play, and then like you said, we don't live in a vacuum. We go, okay, well, here's I don't know why this is important to me, but it is. And then you see somebody else do it. Like for me, it was Ronnie Tutt. We talked about
mhm,
that during the Zorro show. But then you go from Ronnie Tutt. Well, before Ronnie Tutt with Elvis, it was DJ Fontana, and
mhm,
then you're watching DJ play, and then, well, who was the guy that played drums for Johnny Cash? And then, oh my gosh, well, what about this other guy that's in that same realm? You've got Waylon Jennings, and then from there, I got into rock and roll, and it keeps building, and you draw from those influences. But then the educator in me
mhm.
um, wants to know, well, okay, well, how can I pass this on better? Because it's one thing, I mean, I'm Jeremy, I'm sure you'll agree with me. When you started teaching, the person that you were when you started teaching, or the teacher that you were when you started teaching, and the teacher that you are now, are two completely different teachers, right?
Light years apart.
Exactly, light years apart. Me too. Me too. I mean, I can't. You know, I don't even. I don't know how I ever became one, because I so didn't know what I was doing.
Right.
You know, and then now, again, back to, okay, you got an 8-year-old who really wants to understand how to play the quarter note, how to play a drum groove, and having the patience to sit with them, and not be annoyed, or not be upset, or be able to go, there's no such thing as a dumb question, ask the
Right.
question.
Right.
I look to people like Dom Fimulero. I look to people like Zorro. I can't. I would be remiss if I didn't say this name, Greg Bissonette.
Mhm,
Studying with Greg. Greg is the type of person, we've had him on the show, and I mean, Chris Brady and I always laugh about this. He's the guy that has every word in the English language in his mouth all at the same time, and he wants to get them all out all at the same time.
yeah.
He's just so excited, and he's such a great guy, and so damn humble,
Mhm,
and he really has made the world a better place, and he truly wants to make you a better drummer.
mhm,
And so I feel such a responsibility that when I drop those two names, Don Fimulero and Greg Bissonette, I've had the privilege to study with those guys. I'm not boasting. I'm so thankful that I got to do that, and I learned so much. So I feel a duty and a responsibility to sit here
mhm,
and practice and get better, so that I can pass on what I learned to my students. You know
mhm,
what I mean?
mhm.
Because of what they taught me. And some of the lessons I learned from them had very little to do with actually playing the instrument.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah,
You
yeah.
know? Yeah.
Ray made a nice comment I want to share with everybody. He said Chris Brady, who we all know and love, from Aquarian, made sure I got time to sit with Roy. Roy is Roy. Oh my God, what am I spacing
Roy
out?
Burns.
Burns, thank you. I was about to say Roy Haynes, like no, Roy Burns. And enjoy his time with him. Roy was the guy who started Aquarian Drumheads. Was a brilliant drummer and educator. And he inspired. Ray says he inspired me to do clinics and perform and pay it back. And I just got back from 2 months in Germany doing just that. We're definitely not on this path alone. If only we are brave enough and can carry that spark to a flame.
Yeah.
So another great
Well
example.
said, Ray.
Yeah, man. Good. Kudos to you, brother, for touring in Germany and doing some clinics. That's awesome. Um, uh, Another great example of like Roy inspired him to do clinics. Had that maybe he had not had that connection with Roy, maybe he wouldn't be where he is now, or his path would have taken a different turn.
Totally.
Um,
And how can
so,
we not talk about Roy Burns and what he did? Talk about standing on the shoulders of giants.
right.
You know, he was the guy that talked to Ron Marquez and said, "Hey, look, I need some products made for my drums," and they started acquiring drum heads. He was also an author. He penned what 10 books, I think. Chris would be able to tell us that for sure. He was the first clinician. He played for Duke Ellington. He played for Benny Goodman,
Oh,
and I remember one time walking through Aquarian, and Roy had just written an article that he was going to submit to Modern Drummer. When I say he had written an article, pencil on a yellow tablet, not even a pen, and he wrote this article. And he goes, "Read this for me and tell me if it makes sense." I'm like, "You talking to me?" and he really wanted my opinion, and that made me feel so good. And there again, it's that thing where he was humble enough to go, "Hey, Bart, read this for me and tell me if this makes sense. Would you, as a reader, would you think that this I hit the mark with this?"
so
That's where we help each other out. That's
yeah,
where we help each other.
not just help, but like look, here it is, all these years later, and you're still telling the story of that experience in that moment. And Ray was just sharing his experience, just sitting with Roy and having some conversations. And I know all of us have these stories that we can tell, these touchstones that we look back on in our lives, like, oh yeah, when I saw this drummer play, or when I hung out with this drummer, or when I had this lesson, or whatever it is, or when I went to deck day, haha. um, and and and
What's deck day?
we'll talk about that. But it goes to underscore and illustrate how powerful those moments can be. And it's really easy as being on the other side, on the mentor side, like as teachers, as educators, and even as performers, to underestimate how impactful those small things can be for other people and their lives and their paths and their how it impacts them. And so it's a reminder to be humble always. It's a reminder to care about how you do what you do, you know?
Right, right.
If you mail in your lesson because you're not really there, or you're distracted, or you're not really wanting to be there, and you're not giving your student your full attention and care and heart and soul, then you're missing an opportunity to potentially have one of those sparking moments that we are talking about here. And you never know how those come around, like I bet you some of the stories that we tell about where we had these really heavy moments, that what you're just talking about, Bart, with Roy, where he asked you to read his article and you're like, what, me? And it gave you this feeling of, wow, I believing in yourself, to all of a sudden you're more important than you thought you were, right? It gave you a
Right.
sort of self-respect.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't I bet that sometimes, if you would tell Roy was around and you told him that story, he'd be like, "Really? You know,
Yeah.
I don't even remember that." Or when although I remember that, but it didn't seem like a big deal to me at the time. But it was a huge deal for you, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
this is what I'm talking about. Like, you never know where your influence leads, and so you have to take really good care to you know to that your intentions are good, and that you're trying to steer people, inspire them, you know, um, and
Yeah.
to care about what you do as a drummer, as a performer, as a human being,
Yeah.
these things matter. And look at all these stories we tell about how much these little moments mattered to us and how they shaped our paths, because people believed in us when we didn't know enough to believe in ourselves.
Right.
I'm gonna
Right.
tell you guys a story. Um, my son Evan, I talk about him all the time. I've played his music on deck. He's an amazing jazz piano player, and uh, he was at Stanford Jazz Institute. They have these summer workshops every year, and he's been going for the last 4 or 5 years to this, and he loves it. It's great. Gets to hang out with all these world class jazz piano players who are the faculty there, and I mean world class, like Kenny Barron and George Cables and Taylor Heitstein and all these heavy people that are all super cool and accessible and like great for them, right? How cool. And this last summer, and this is not a bragging thing, this is just like one of these stories about how important these connections are. He was
Right.
hanging out with Taylor Heitstein, who's like multi-Grammy, one of the heavy dudes now in jazz piano playing. And he said to my son, he's like, Evan, man, you could be one of the cats. Like, and he told me the story, I got chills, and he said, Dad, to have someone like that who I have so much respect for tell
Yep.
me that I have the potential to be at that top level, it made me believe in myself in a way that I never have before. And I was like, again,
Wow.
I was incredible. It was incredible. And he
That
said,
almost made me cry.
I know, I'm getting all teary. And he said, the only person stopping me from reaching that level of success is going to be me. And I thought, wow, he just said that one comment to him, but that so impactful, so
Yeah.
meaningful, so important, so profound. And I know that influenced him in a really important way. And so, like, I love seeing that stuff happen. And I don't know, I don't get back as a teacher. Someone comes back to me 20 years later and says, hey, remember that thing you said to me? That was really,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't get that, but it doesn't matter, because
Yeah.
you just got to trust that what you're doing is you're putting it out there, and that karmically kind of comes back and is helping people out all the time.
I had a for instance, one time where I thought I really didn't think that much of this experience. We were playing. I've been, as for those of you who are watching or see this or hear this who don't know, I've been the drummer for the Sam Morrison Band for 25 years, and it's been such an incredible uh, um, opportunity for me, and I've learned so much in that band. And we have played every kind of show imaginable. We have played everything from the worst gig we ever played. We played an art gallery opening, which was there's a story for you. We played a thing called Nude Fest. We played a nude fest one time. There's another story for you. And we've done those type of gigs, and we've played arenas and stadium, like Cohen Stadium, and it's been amazing. One night we were playing. We used to play a ton of biker shows, like a lot of biker stuff, like the Laughlin River Run and all these different biker events, like Sturgis type of stuff like that. Anyway, we're playing at the Laughlin River Run. We get done with the gig, and this gig was a grind. It was 4 days, and it was 5 shows a day. And
Mm.
they had three bands rotating all day. We got done with our last set, and I'm packing up my drums, and I just want to get out of there. Now, if you've never been to a biker run, and if you're in that world, then go to one, and you'll enjoy it. If you're not in the world, don't go. You won't enjoy it. It's every kind of depravity you can possibly imagine, and tons of leather and beer and booze, and just it's rock and roll. Every cliche you can imagine, it is. And this guy was there with his son. I was actually a husband and wife and their son. And this kid stood on the side of the stage and watched me play the whole last set.
Mm.
And we get done and we pull the drum set off the stage, and he's talking to me. And I told him, I said, buddy, I'm not trying to blow you up. I just gotta, I gotta pack up here, but you can stand here and talk to me. I'll pack up. Sure, no problem. I'm packing up drums, putting cymbals away, breaking down hardware. And he goes, can I help you? And I
Mm.
go, you sure? I'm not going to turn down help tearing apart the drum set. And he goes, I don't know what to do. And I go, oh, well, yeah, I'll show you. So he's helping me tear down, and he's telling me about how he plays drums. And we have this really nice conversation. And he's a kid. He was probably 10 or 12 years old. And man, this kid was, he was being, they were bringing him up hard, man. He was seeing stuff he probably shouldn't have seen at that age.
Yeah, right.
And, um, so anyway, he helps me pack it up. I get it all loaded up. Everything gets put in the trailer. We're done for the night. And I talk to him for another 10 minutes or so and see you, kid. Nice to meet you. Years later, okay, I find myself in the same type of situation. I don't remember if it was Laughlin or not, but it was another biker event thing that we were doing. And now this guy comes up to me and, hey, Bart, how you doing? Shaking my head. Hey, man, thank you so much that night for letting me help you tear down your drums. I had no clue. I
Whoa.
had I had no idea who this guy was. Here's this leather-clad, beer-drinking, bearded guy, and he was, a man's man. And
Mhm.
he goes, you remember me helping you do with that? And I go, yeah, man, you were that kid? And he goes, yeah. Oh my God. At the moment, at first, I didn't know what it was. But then after he explained it to me, I'm like, I
Mhm.
totally remember that. And he's like, man, that just meant so much to me that you would let me help you tear down your drums, man. I mean, and I was blown away by that. And again, it was just that little human element of talking to a kid and talking drums and
Mhm.
then when they go, well, Steve, do you still play? Oh yeah, now that I'm working, I got this great drum set out in the garage. And it's a hobby for him, but he remembered that moment. And I think it's just about, again, being a human and
Mhm.
being just talking to somebody, not being a jerk, you know so
Yeah,
anyway,
you
you know
you didn't even give him any kind of pearls of wisdom in that exchange. You're just like being open to like a little kid, being excited about the drums and helping you out. And you're like, sure, I'm going to help
yeah,
support that excitement. Yeah, man, grab a hardware bag, whatever. Um,
totally, and
that
that's all it was, and it
wasn't
meant
nothing
something
for
to him.
you, but important for him, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's important to me too because I didn't have to carry all my junk. But no, and I think that, and so even with something like that, and that wasn't an education thing, it wasn't anything. It was just hanging out, tearing down my drums, and it meant something. And I think that things like that, years later, you put yourself in this situation. Well, what would Dom Fimulero have done? What would have this person have done? And as a side note, a couple years later, Chris Brady, and I forgot there was somebody else. We were at the Hollywood Drum Show, and Bissonette got called in to sub because whoever the headliner was canceled out, and they had a kit for him, but it didn't have the right heads. And so Chris and I are just tearing this drum set apart and throwing heads on it and trying to tune it up and blah 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 blah. We get the drum set set up. Greg comes in and and I remember he sat behind the drums and he's tapping around and he looks at me and he goes, man, when somebody tells you to tune up a tom tom, you don't mess around. This sounds great. And it's those, again, that
Yeah,
human thing, that little thing where you're like, he gave me a compliment on tuning a drum, something I do every day, but it means something. There
yeah.
again, so there is that moment where, standing on the shoulder of giants, I learned how to tune a drum, I did something right, and he appreciated it. So
Well,
total geek out story, but it's
no,
it's important.
It's great, Bart. It's great because gosh, we all are such, most of us, self doubters, right? We've had less episodes talking about imposter syndrome. We've had
Right.
lessons talking about overcoming the demons of self doubt. I write about that in my book. I know you do a little bit too. Like, it's so easy to like go down the path of we were having a conversation before we got on today. I
Mhm.
suck. I'm not good enough. I haven't done enough things. I haven't played this venue. I haven't gotten the cover of this magazine. I haven't gotten this endorsement or whatever. Maybe for you guys out there, it's I haven't, I didn't get into the band I was trying to get into, play bar gigs, whatever. Um, and sometimes all it takes is someone to say that they believe in you, for you to start believing yourself. We mentioned this earlier. I had a student come in to start taking lessons with me 6 months ago or so, adult woman, and she sort of had a laundry list of all the things she wanted to improve on. She'd been playing for some time already, and I really want to get better at whatever it was. My big band setups or something. She's playing in a big band, and I don't remember what it was. She played, and I said, "You sound great," and she just started crying. And she was like, you could tell that like no one had ever told her that. Like,
Right.
oh, she was so hung up on the self-doubt and I'm not good enough and I need to work on this and that. I'm like, yeah, no, there's things for us to work on for sure. But you sound great. You sound really good. And we'll work on this and that and we'll improve here and there. But like, it just all the more powerful because I'm just bringing up that we all struggle with that stuff so much, right?
Right.
And so you might have been. I mean, you tune drum heads all the time, but maybe you weren't, so confident about your drum head tuning. And Greg Bissonette says, "Oh man, you really tuned your drum great." And you're like, "Oh wow, I do know how to tune the drum."
That inner 8-year-old. Hey, guess what Greg said?
Exactly.
Guess what Winnie the Pooh told me?
And it's exactly. It's just validating, man. And getting the guys on here who are like the top pros, and we talk to them, we interview them, and they say stuff that, and all of us are nodding our heads like, yep, yeah, I believe the same thing. Oh my god, that's exactly what I tell my students, or that's just how I think about playing drums too, in this way. And it's validating, right? It's like, oh, okay, if the people,
Very.
if the guys that are the best, most respected names in the world are thinking about this stuff the same way we are, we're on the right track.
I have two things that I want to throw out, but the first one I want to throw out, I'm gonna put you in the hot seat, Jeremy, and not in a bad way. So, standing on the shoulders of giants. We did a debrief, one of these shows that Jeremy did, that he had recorded it at Skywalker Ranch. He got to record there. And if you don't know what Skywalker Ranch is, it's a recording studio that is owned by this guy by the name of Steven Spielberg,
No,
and
no,
or I mean,
George
who?
Lucas.
George Lucas. Why did I say Steven Spielberg?
Well, because they're good buddies and they made.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah, one made a movie about sharks, the other one about aliens. I don't
So,
know. Anyway, uh, and that is some dude. That's heavy.
mm,
That's heavy. And talk a little bit about the experience. Talk a little bit about what you did, and talk about how you, if you were in your head, how you got out of your head and did your job, because that's a big deal, dude. I told you, if you ever get to do it again, you call me. I'm
yeah,
canceling everything, and I'm going to tech for you. I just want to come hang. I want to see it.
it,
You know.
it's a pretty cool. It was a pretty cool experience. It's actually that was my second time recording there, and
Wow.
the first time that I had recorded, we were one of my good friends named Steve Bissinger. He's an amazing guitar player. He played in this band with me for a few years called Jen and the Charmers. Beautiful guitar player. And he works as a sound designer guy for the movies. So he's worked on all kinds of big movies. He's worked with Steven Spielberg and all kinds of people. And he for a long time his office he worked at Skywalker Ranch, and so we had to do these overdubs on our recording, and I needed to lay down some tambourine tracks, and then we were also going to record some piano that we didn't have on the original session. So he was able to book the studio, at a discounted rate because he works there, but we had to do it at like midnight.
Cool.
So
I'm there.
because this is when the studio's available, right? And so I'd never been there, and it's this complex out in Marin that there's no signage. Like it's very easy to miss because it's like it's many acres, but it's sort of recessed behind away from the road, and you have to go through a guard tower, where there's like a security guard, and beautiful, stunning, rolling hills, lakes, and state of the art movie making and sound studios. Right. I mean, this is like George Lucas spared no expense. This is where they made so all these famous movies. So we go into the room, and it's this massive room, and they've got the panels on the wall that you can like adjust by turning some dials and setting some stuff on the wall. The panels can move and change the acoustic shape of the room.
Right.
And then they've got a giant film screen up top, and there's a big stage. And so this is where they actually scored the John Williams movie soundtrack for Star Wars, among many,
Wow.
many other stuff, movies. And so, it was like if you were really quiet, you could hear.
I
That's
would have stood there and done that all
I
day.
did, I did, I did. And it was cool. It just felt like hallowed ground, like
Yeah.
and the room sounded incredible. I mean, I was just playing the tambourine. I was like, "Oh my god, this is the best tambourine I've ever heard." Anyways, we stayed till like 3 in the morning and did our tracks. And it was great. And then the next time I came back was with this woman, Jean, who I recorded with last weekend. Um, and we did this is about 2 years ago, the session at Skywalker, and that was a real session with this woman, Leslie Jones. I think that's her last name, who's like multi-Grammy winning recording engineer and one of the top people in the world at this.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, it was, the recording session was a recording session like any other one, but in that studio, with all that state of the art equipment and the rooms of being so gorgeous and everything, it was just a treat. You felt like the whole time it was like kind of floating.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Were you, when you were there, was there a point where you were, I mean, of course, and you're going to geek out on that sort of stuff. Who wouldn't? But did you get inside your head and get freaked out, or did you just do the gig? Or because at that point, you're standing, you're at a different level of giant. I mean, you're playing, it's a little bit different level there at that point. You're playing for somebody that's a many time Grammy winner, all
Yeah,
this stuff. It would have been really easy to get in there and start turning the screws on yourself. What did you do?
that's true, man. I mean, I have to admit honestly that I might have thought about that for a minute in the beginning, like, oh, here's this high level producer, she just recorded, I forget who it was, like Omar Hakim or somebody just before me. And I thought, oh, I definitely want to play good and make her think I'm good. And who knows, maybe, she recommend me or something. But then I was like, you know what? That all went away very quickly, because as soon as we started tracking, I was like, oh, this is my job. I got a job to do, and I've got to make myself sound good, make the band sound good on these tracks.
Right.
And I really just sort of got right focused into the weeds where I should be present in the moment, thinking about the music, not really about any of that other stuff. Um, and then, yeah, it never really came back. It didn't turn in anything. Like, if she just recorded Omar Hakim, why is she going to recommend me for a gig, right? But it didn't matter. I wasn't thinking about any of that stuff, honestly. It was really just about
Good.
doing a good recording session, and what a treat it was to be in that space. It was like hallowed ground, and it was very cool.
Well, I want to tell a story of mine that when you were telling that story, it made me think of some stuff that I've done, and not at a studio of that caliber, but with a producer of that caliber, and say how I handled it, because I think it's important for the people to hear. I've got to do a number of records with Michael Blum. You and I've talked about that, Jeremy.
Mhm.
Michael Blum, Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd, Madonna's Like a Prayer. I mean, he's recorded Vinnie Colaiuta, he's recorded Carmine Appice, Bissonette. Um, I mean, Gary Malaber was one of his go-to guys who played all the early Steve Miller stuff, Take the Money and Run and everything like that. So when I first got in there working with him, that I really was in my head, and it was really hard to get out of there. It was really hard to get out of my head with that and stay focused. But once I did, it turned into a couple of really cool things. It turned into we ended up doing all these re-records of songs that were big hits at one time, right? uh, for commercial use, right? They might have the rights to a number of different a number of different movies or different songs to go into movie and television, and we had to do the re-records of those. And they literally, the companies that were hiring Michael to re-record those songs wanted them note perfect, just like the originals, but they wanted them to click and all this other stuff. So I would go in and transcribe the songs, and then we would go as far as when I would go in to record them. No, there were no other musicians. It was myself reading down a transcription and cutting just to click, just playing with the click, and it was very. at that point, it was very gratifying because I had gotten to the point from being geeked out and weirded out to, okay, now I'm doing the work. And like you said, Jeremy, you're in the weeds. You're just like, okay, oh, I miss, I know, back me up, punch me in. I mean, you're working at that point. You're being a pro. And so I think my advice, if this is a pearl of wisdom, is if you do find yourself in an area where you're a little bit inside your head, and you find yourself, you've worked to get there, do your best to really focus in on your job. Be the, be, it's kind of like Mike Johnson says, like he was talking about being on the Gretsch roster, the Gretsch drum roster. And he said, all these drummers that had come before me who had played Gretsch, we can go through the lineage, but he goes, I have to earn this now. I have to earn the right to be here. And boy, has he done that. And I think that's what you did at Skywalker. And that's what I tried to do working with Michael Blum. Okay, I'm here now. You could have called Vinny Colaiuta. You could have called Carmine. You could have called it, but you called me. I'm going to earn this. I'm going to earn every note that I play today. And I think that's something that I would say to everybody. Really, if you do get a chance to do that, be there in the moment and be at that point.
Yeah, man. So maybe the one nice thing to think, a little closing thought. We're not quite done, but like, we're talking about standing on the shoulders of giants, and like, don't be afraid to be a giant yourself.
Thank you for saying that.
I mean, it's really easy to be overwhelmed by the star power of the next level of drummers that you're dealing with. It could be at your local pub, bar gig scene, or it could be, where we're at, where, we have these guys on like Matt, Zorro, and um, dudes who are doing it at that next level, and we're like, wow, Walfredo Reyes, right? Um, but
Billy Cobham.
Billy Cobham, yeah, I
We
mean,
have
God,
Billy Cobham. Come on.
this and that. I mean, we got a ton of guys. Um, but to come back to what I said earlier, like, everyone starts out the same, right? We all start out as beginners, and you don't go from beginner to top of the heap in a day or a year or 5 or even 10. Like, they cut their teeth all along the way with their careers, and they put in the hours practicing, studying, playing the gigs, playing the shitty gigs. We all have those nightmare stories. So you got to keep grinding, and don't be afraid to take on a success when it comes your way, uh,
Right.
and be, grow into that moment, and be that great drummer in that moment when you get that gig playing on the big stage or at the big recording session. And if you've done all the work to get to that place, man, you've got the goods to do it. you
Yeah.
know you're not out of your element, right?
And I think it's important to remember that you're kind of doing a job. I mean, yeah, we all love playing the drums, and that's what we want to do. That's what we work so hard to do. But you're doing a job. You're doing a gig. You're providing a service. Well, that's what Matt Starr says. We're in the service industry, and we truly are. I mean, we really are in the service industry. And then also remember that I think it's important to remember that people are people, and we've had so many incredible guests on the show that we've interviewed and we've got to talk to, and I know we'll have many more. And all the stories are kind of the same. they're
Yeah.
all they're all it's the same story.
Mhm.
And then the one thing that you kind of it reminds us of as humans is that maybe when you get that gig, it's not exactly what you had thought it had been. And he was very cool about not saying anything negative. But um, when when Billy Cobham came on the show, it just joined, it sparked a thing, and we were talking about playing with Miles Davis.
Right.
And I think his words were like, "Oh man, I don't want to open that can of worms," Like,
Uh-huh.
and he said it in such a fashion that maybe he wasn't saying anything negative about Miles, but he was talking about maybe the gig and what they had gone through on the gig or what have you. But it makes you realize that no matter how genius a person is, you're seeing the facade that is allowed to be seen. You don't know what is behind that when you're behind the kit playing with the person, and and bring your uniqueness to that gig.
Yeah, that's it. Be the best version of yourself, and don't try to be a version of anybody else that you think you're supposed to be, right? Because
Right, right.
that's why you're there, is to be Bart. That's why I was at
Yeah,
that session, was to play the drums the way Jeremy plays the drums, right?
right. Oh, well, look what Fred just said. Put Fred's thing up. That's perfect. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Each one of us has something special to offer. So when you get the chance to swing the bat, swing and hit the home run, swing for the
Yeah,
fence. Yeah.
exactly. And that's what I think is important, Fred. You hit the nail on the head. I mean, really do. I mean, if you're every one of us, you're going to get the base hit from time to time, but man, when you're up at bat, man, point to the upper deck and go for it, man, because
Yeah.
I mean, that's what else do you have? I
And
mean, the
you
worst that
miss,
could happen is you don't get it.
right. That's right. You miss, but at least you walk away from that feeling like, hey, I did everything I could to give it my best shot.
Exactly.
All
And
you
I,
for, man. The chips, I'm dealing with this now. We've talked about this about auditions, and I'm dealing with a lot of kids who got into or didn't get into their high school jazz programs, and
yeah,
like, all you can do is put your best foot forward, and you don't get in. Figure out what you can do better for the next one, and learn from it.
yeah,
You're not always going to win every one of those. You're not going to hit the home run with the bases loaded every time.
yeah.
Um,
I think that when you audition and you don't get the gig, I mean, you walk away and lick your wounds for a little bit, but I think it sharpens you. It makes you, okay, well, I didn't get the gig because who knows, maybe they just wanted somebody with purple hair that shot off to the left, and I'm not that guy. Or maybe I didn't swing well enough, or maybe I wasn't in the pocket enough, or and this is a double-edged sword. This is a double-edged sword, right? Because we've all had, we're drummers. We've all had that, man. You're rushing, or you're dragging, or your time isn't just right. Maybe you're a little off. I work with a click all the time. Like, I play to, like, the Sam Morrison show. One of the shows that we do, 98% of the show, I played a click.
mm,
And there's 3 songs in this particular show that I don't play to click. There's no backing tracks. I'm just listening to the click, right? And man, I'm on that thing. I mean, I've done it for years. I'm on it. And sometimes it's like, it's hurting mice a little bit because I know what each person needs. But having done it for that many years, everybody is tight as well. Well, certain songs, you don't want that. You want the song to breathe. Now I've heard from people, man, you're too rigid. You're too on the click. Let it breathe a
mm,
little bit. And it's like,
mm.
well, what do you want? Do you want me on the click? Do you not want me on the click? Do you want you? And so you have to learn to ride that line of okay, I'm going to be this person here, and then I'm going to be that person there, and and being able to be flexible with that sort of stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, because that can happen too. One minute you're the guy for the job and you're doing it great, and then the very next song, oh no, that's not the way it should be. And you have to learn to do that. And when you listen to the Standing on the Shoulders of Giants, when you listen to the greats, you listen to Bissonette, the producer, oh, I don't want that. I want your best. I want your best, Elvin Jones. Okay, coming up. And he gives him his best, Elvin Jones. Or, no, that's too much. Give me some more,
Right.
give me some more Louis Bellson. Okay, here comes Louis. And he adapts, and I think that's something we all have to do.
Yeah, yeah. I was just telling one of my students the other day about that our job is to be chameleons, and that to be a good drummer, you got to be adaptable, and not just do it your way, but try to make the music and be able to switch gears and shift styles and be the master of feels, and that's the gig. It's not about
Yeah.
how. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and when you certainly don't want to affect the song or the music in a negative way, So that's, I mean, goes without saying, but that, I think, comes with being a chameleon, because if
Right. Right.
I really think that.
First do no harm. The Hippocratic
Exactly.
applies to drumming as well.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So anyway, I think that was a good topic, standing on
Yeah,
the
man.
shoulders of giants.
Great, great. Really,
And
really
it's
good. We didn't really get into the weeds about talking about the drummers who influenced us and our favorite drummers and what impact they had on us. But that's a big piece of the puzzle, for me, is like thinking about all the drummers I listened to, who's, sitting in my room when I was 13, 15, 17, 25 now, who I, just it, make my life better because of their drumming, and make actually impact my drumming because of their drumming. I learned stuff from them. And um, I remember I bought this when I was probably 25. I bought this Bernard Purdy record, and it was a vinyl album, and it was just Bernard Purdy playing beats. That's it. It was like a record for DJs, and he was just sitting there, playing funk beats, like for the whole two sides of the thing. And
wow.
it was awesome. And I listened to the thing over and over and over. And I was like, oh man, how does he get his hi hat to sound like that? Like that hot skillet with the drop of oil, pss, pss, right? And I sat there with the record and like tried to get my hi hat to sound like Bernard Purdy's hi hat, the open, splash. And I don't know if I ever got, he had a different pair of hi hats, whatever, but like it made me work, right? It made me work
Yeah,
on that, and it made me a better drummer because of that. I was more in control of it. I was more thoughtful and intentional about my hi hat sound. And
right.
there's an example of like how, why do I play the way I play? Well, one small reason, one little aspect of my playing is because I listened to the Bernard Purdy record and try to emulate his hi-hat sound. So, there's all these drummers that have had those kinds of influences on all of us, I know. Um,
So let's end the show with this. Give me your top three, and I know I'm opening a can of worms that'll go on
yeah,
for days,
boy,
but just give me the top three. Who would you listen to? I mean, my God, there's a question for you.
oh boy. I mean, so the first two are sort of easy, and I have to think about the third. The first two are Steve Gadd and
Okay,
Elvin Jones for me.
okay.
Um, What about you? You got your three lined up?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Go for it.
John Bonham, John Bonham,
And John
and
Bonham.
John Bonham. Yeah,
Okay.
no, I generally, John Bonham, Tommy Aldridge, Alex Van Halen in the rock world. I'll say, and I mean,
Okay,
and
yeah.
in the jazz world. My
Right.
God, forget
Yeah,
about it. Forget
right,
about
right. I know that's the thing. It's
it.
like
Yeah.
it's so there's so many amazing dudes, and it's hard to sort of like boil it down to like who are the three most important or influential. But um,
You can't
so
do it. You can't.
yeah,
It's impossible.
yeah, right.
I now I feel bad that I said those three.
Yeah, yeah. There's so many guys whose drumming I love so much and who are interesting and unique, and like like Richie Hayward from Little Feat. I love his drumming,
Right,
but
right.
he's not like one of the core Mount Rushmore dudes. But I nonetheless like what an
Dude,
awesome drummer.
Butch Norton. We had him on the show.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, dude, I watched him play the other day. I went on YouTube and I looked up Butch Norton, and I'm watching this guy. He wasn't even playing a drum set. He was just sitting behind a whole bunch of percussion stuff. And I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
what are you doing? How do you do that? Oh, it was so cool. It was so cool.
So
Yeah,
man, you know what? Turns out we're surrounded by giants
we
everywhere,
are. They're
and,
everywhere.
and turns out we're all giants ourselves.
I'm just trying not to get stepped on, man.
Yeah, you can, man. You're way up there. You're top of the trees, brother.
Well, thanks, brother. Back at
All
you.
right,
Back at
guys.
you.
Thanks for tuning in. Fred, Ray, thank you guys for being part of it.
Yeah, Fred and Ray, man.
It's
Thank you
great,
guys
great
so much.
comments.
Fred,
Yeah,
I hope your knee is getting better.
yeah, yeah. We're thinking about you, dude. Hope your recovery's going well.
Yeah, yeah, man.
A couple of
You're the
upcoming
best.
things worth mentioning. PASIC is coming up in November. And
Yes.
we're going to be there at PASIC. We're not going to have a booth or anything, but we will be there hanging out, going to all the clinics and checking it out. So if you're at
I'm
PASIC,
gonna
say
I'm gonna
hi.
show my latest kung fu moves. I don't know why I'm doing this.
Oh, Bart's going to have a kung fu booth
I'm gonna have a kung fu booth.
at the drum
Uh,
expo. Yeah,
That's right.
how to chop through drum heads.
That's right.
Um,
How to chop through
cut
chop
through red
suey.
paint. Yeah. And we're going to have with a PASIC. And we've already planned our next deck day, which is going to happen down at the Aquarian Drumheads factory in Orange, California, and that's going to be in April. I don't remember the
April. Is it 26th or 21st? Something. It's whatever
date.
that Saturday is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
whatever that Saturday
super excited
is.
about that.
Yeah.
And we'll see you guys next week.
We'll see you next week. Here, I'm going to do my best Rick Stojak.
This is Rick Stojak.